Now, we were just talking, you were at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference in San Francisco, where tons of news and deals and stuff get announced. What did you take away from that experience? What excites you?
So, we've been on the tear for the last 10 years of the growth in biotechnology and tools and diagnostics. And I think everybody's always worried that that's going to end. I would just tell you, we've seen some amazing companies, both private and public companies. Be a lot of financing that gets done, I think, particularly in the first half of this year. The science that we're seeing and the commercialization of that science is really picking up speed. And I can just see for the next 5 or 10 years, we talk about personalized medicine in a very, sort of obtuse way, but I'm looking at companies that can really drill in on how we can deliver personalized medicine, gene therapies and things like that for disease states that we've just begun to uncover. And it's an incredible revolution. We will look back on this time period and say, wow, this is probably the biggest single advancement in medicine, modern medicine, maybe in our lifetimes.
You're clearly very excited, and your eyes just light up when you talk about it. It kind of reminds me of how people were talking about cannabis not so long ago. I mean,
it's a little
bubble,
different.
It's a little bit different, but that bubble has burst. We know that. And long term, I know that you're optimistic because you believe it will be legalized federally. What happens in the meantime? What does 2020 bring for the sector?
I think there will be some consolidation in the sector, and I think it's really a tale of two cities, if you will, or two geographies. Outside the United States, capital was abundant because you could engage in raising money for a lot of companies that weren't under the U.S. federal regulations. Inside the U.S., those companies were largely capital starved because a lot of folks couldn't do it. So as a result, when you look at the MSO's performance, right, the U.S. operators, they're actually doing pretty well. They've had to build legitimate business models that where they drive returns on equity because they've had to put it to work judiciously. Versus some of the larger non-U.S. players have had a lot of capital, and they've really chosen a path towards global domination and trying to build massive brands very quickly. That has to get rationalized.
Okay.
There are well-capitalized players out there. The better capitalized you are, the more likely you are to be able to acquire things. It reminds me a lot of the early days of the internet. There will be winners, there will be losers, but this business is not going away. Cannabis is going to be, it already is a global phenomenon. It's going to be a global agro business that grows significantly over the next decade. And if you pick the right kind of companies with the right kind of management teams, you're going to make money.
So let's talk about another theme here. I mean, we've been talking a lot about Apple being an all-time high, Qualcomm, a lot of the chip makers and the cloud companies, and all this seems to be predicated on this potential rollout of 5G, specifically here in the U.S. Are you seeing opportunities there, not necessarily just with the hardware and the chip makers, but with maybe the cloud companies that could sort of be beneficiaries as well?
Yeah, so one of the things that's unleashing this ability to do like personalized medicine, for example, is the fact that we have the cloud. And we have cloud computing and massive amounts of technologies that can crunch massive amounts of data. Just that in and of itself is an enabler. And we look at tech-enabled services and how tech is changing the landscape in each of our industries. And so I would just say to you, there's a ton to be done, not just in the build-out of 5G and LTE, but I would think any services that require or that utilize broadband capability. What we're seeing over the top is incredible. It's going to change it's going to continue to change the way that people consume media in this country and globally. And I think we're a little spoiled here. So we see actually other parts of the world that aren't quite at 5G. And so when you think about global rollout of 5G and global consumption of media product and broadband services, like we get it here in New York, we get it here in the United States, and we stream on any device. Most of the world doesn't get the chance to do that. And so I just think there's a huge tailwind behind that as well.
So obviously investors and corporates, they want to know what to sell to the burgeoning population of people who are all younger than those of us at this table, millennials, and increasingly they're pretty old too, and Gen Z.
Don't tell my kids that.
Oh, come on. They are. But no, I don't. But how do you see are the big things that like everyone's going to be racing to, whether it's media or consumption trends that are targeted around this group of this cohort that's just going to have more and more money?
So I'll just say, in the next decade, let's just say that 70% of the consumption world will be millennial or Gen Z. All right. But the global sort of, if you look at when the global wealth transfer actually occurs, it's probably not for another 30 years.
That's a long time.
Right? That's a long time. Wow. But you got to put your stake in the ground now. Here's what we know about millennials. And again, it's like what I know about my kids. They fundamentally believe that we live in a post-truth world, which means they're going to consume the news they want to consume, and they'll make their own determinations as to what they think is authentic. Historically, when we grew up, media told us who
What
should
to
be
believe.
influencing.
Right.
Now, millennials choose influencers, and then those influencers have the ability to influence. Very different consumption patterns off the back of that. And so when you're thinking about building your global brands or you're thinking about how you cater to that, you've got to recognize there's some fundamental shifts in consuming patterns, and that's what we think is going to be the watchword for the next few years.